So, and then I also thought, I wonder if that would work up in North Dallas. I don't know. But so I go in, and of course, silly me, the man who runs the store is named Jasper Bacchus. That's his name. And he wasn't wearing a toga. He wasn't, one of the ancient gods of revelry, but he was a fixture in the community and had been around for a real long time, and he knew things. So I show up, and I've got a little reporter's notebook in my hand and a pen, and I actually had a newly minted business card that probably said Senior Rube on it, but I had given it to him, and we began talking, and he says, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm wandering. I'm just trying to take the pulse of the city. I'm kind of new in town. I'm using that line everywhere, even with police officers, I guess, when they stop me. But I say that, something like that, in paraphrasing, but I'm just trying to learn, where I've just moved to. So we talk a little bit. Then at some point in the conversation, it had to have been predicated on something I say, but I've exiled it, I think, to my subconscious. He comes out from around behind his counter and begins screaming at me in colorful language, and then throws my business card at me and literally chases me out of his store. It's a little like the Wild West with the swinging saloon doors. That's the way I remember it. And I'm going backwards, out into the street. There weren't swinging doors, but it felt like I was in an old John Wayne movie and being tossed to the curb. And what he's saying is that you're a fake, you're a phony, you're a fraud, you're an imposter. I don't know who you are or what you want. And then he said, and I just, seared into my brain, he said, no one from any newspaper ever comes here. So you are a liar. You're an ambassador without portfolio. We don't know who you are. I don't know what your game is. And that was, right after I had arrived in Dallas almost 30 years ago. And I didn't think about that. It's not that long ago, perhaps. But I realized, again, I didn't know anything. There was more to learn. I went back to the paper, and it turned out that he had called the newspaper to ask if I had worked there. And the presumption, the prevailing wisdom was that I was a cop, that I was there writing down things and frankly, drawing up a list, a punitive list. No good would come of this. So I really had a lot to learn. I really had to work through some things to understand, where I was. And again, I maintain, and I think you will too, if anybody is foolhardy enough to snag one of these books for your own, you'll perhaps be unsettled by the thought that I might not have ever learned anything, but that we need to continue the dialogue, and we need to continue the discussion, that all of us, in a way, need to stop, go places that we really haven't gone before. And forgive me, this is the cue the violin moment, but that we need to just stop, go inside and talk to people and ask them what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and admit, hopefully, that we don't really know and don't presume to know the context, not just the intimate details. That's actually pretty easy. All of us are so astute, I think, wonderful observers. I know many of you are far better observers than me, but that ability to capture in your mind's eye, the camera in your brain, what's right in front of you. And I can't remember my own name sometimes. I know I'm going to have trouble finding my car when I leave. I'm going to have to ask somebody. Or get off campus. I took 7 left turns. I know that. I know I did. And I found myself back where I was. But that whole notion of understanding the sweep, the panorama, the history, it's really a challenge. But when I think people recognize that you're at least coming with your hat in your hand, the level of discourse gets a little deeper, and it gets a little deeper, and people do let you in at some point. And the stories you're going to hear will blow your mind. They did my mind, and it just becomes a more fulfilling and enriching process. A lot of dogged work. And I should say, by the way, that over time I kind of reconnected a little bit with Mr. Bacchus, not to the point where he was giving me a discount on my dry cleaning, but that he wasn't chasing me anymore. The irony of that, by the way, is when he was chasing me, I sort of was jogging a little bit, backwards, I might not look like I could jog forwards now, but I was kind of, going in retreat a little bit there. It happened to be right by, across the street from his place was this really grand old mansion, three-story, beautiful-looking building. That is where Stanley Marcus had grown up, as in Neiman Marcus. And later on when I realized that, it just added another layer, another thing to think about, the context. He's one of the most famous, entrepreneurs, the mercantile king of Texas. Stanley Marcus's book, I think, was called "Who's Minding the Store?" But Neiman Marcus, he's a well-heeled cat. But here it was his old house that he had probably white flighted out of when he was a kid, and his family had left right in the heart of South Dallas, smack dab on what is now Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. I was quite comfortable in my knowledge that I'm not knocking Stanley Marcus, I'm just saying I was pretty sure he still wasn't living in that house. You begin to think about things, the hidden stories, the things that you don't know that sometimes are right there in front of you. It got to be an inordinate obsession. I'll try to wrap up here quick in case anybody has any questions. But I suppose on a comical level, my wife used to call it my African American complex, and say, what is it? Why are you doing this? And I don't know. I walked in a meeting one time at the Dallas Morning News, and two high-ranking editors were there. This was in the early '80s also, and they were laughing. Kind of sharing a joke, and I kind of walked in their little glass office. We used to call those people glass holes, by the way. Sorry for that. For any children here, I should have given you fair warning there, just a little quick. But so then I walked in, and they're laughing. I always presumed, they must be saying the O-S-H-I-T joke about me again. Here comes Bill. I don't know. I'm always wary, a little insecure at all times. And they said, actually, that, there's a joke going on about you. I'm going, okay, great. I now feel, validated in my insecurity. What's that? What's the joke? I'll play along. And they said, well, the joke is that whenever two black people meet in Dallas, Bill Minutaglio shows up. I said, well, I didn't laugh. And I still don't really to these days. I think it's more a reflection on them, I hope. I feel morally superior, just probably framing it this way and telling the story. But it told me something. It registered on me that something that I had been doing for whatever reasons, and probably without a calculated process, really, just sort of this organic thing, I was developing a reputation, and I began receiving awards from black journalist organizations, a lot of them. And again, I note, as I said earlier, I'm not black. There was a county commissioner in Dallas, kind of a famous, almost infamous guy, who he used to get into a lot of, tight situations in Dallas. He would be involved in a lot of protests and, he was a community organizer. He was a county commissioner, but he really took it to the powers that be. And oftentimes would come down and, frankly, protest against the Dallas Morning News. He'd be out front. His name was John Wiley Price. I don't know if anybody knows of him, but a very famous, and some would say infamous or controversial figure. I don't know, but one day he was out protesting in front of the Dallas Morning News and got into this scuffle. A jogger, if I recall, was coming by. Somehow somebody bumped into somebody, and this guy injured himself. And the truth, as I said earlier, is in the gray zone. I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a little bit of a fracas. And the cops were kind of looking for him after a while, John Wiley Price, the county commissioner. So the upshot is that he contacted the newspaper. I was at home when all this happened. I didn't really know anything about it, but I was at home when I got a phone call from my editor, the grande queso, the big cheese, called and said, this is strange, but really one of the prominent, I'm paraphrasing, perhaps prominent African-American activist in our city only wants to talk to you, and you have to come down here and work on a story and speak with him. And I mentioned this in my book, that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that because of my lack of understanding, my inability to articulate the history. I could articulate the overt circumstances. I'm a reporter. I could tell you what happened, maybe. It was a little confusing, but a little reporting, I could figure it out, or at least get the official police report and figure it out. But I couldn't presume to do what I increasingly wanted to do in a daily newspaper, which was write about 5,000 words about the history that led to this moment, 2:08 p.m. on a hot day in Dallas, outside of 508 Young Street, in downtown Dallas. It deserves that, and I think, we don't do it often enough. There are still a few stalwarts out there in mainstream journalism who actually will go long on a story, not for showy adjective reasons, but really I think to try to incorporate that context, that panorama again, that's so necessary and important. It could take a lifetime, several lifetimes, and I don't know that I ever even, again, remotely got close. But these little things, anecdotal things, walking in on two editors, and another editor, the head of the entire paper, calling me with some befuddlement. I think he was on to me at that point. It's like, holy crap, Minutaglio has been sneaking out again and doing stories. Here's something kind of ironic, by the way, that occurs to me about that's somewhat symbolic. When I got to Dallas to work at the Dallas Morning News, we had a bureau. Newspapers have bureaus, correct? And oftentimes we have them, or in the good flush days, we have them in Mexico City. The Dallas Morning News when I got there, had a bureau in Toronto, Canada, Toronto. We had one in Mexico City. We were trying to figure out how to get one in Cuba. We were developing one in Berlin. And guess where else we had one? And this was a title it was called the South Dallas Bureau, as if it was Toronto, as if it was Mexico, as if it was another country. And that always stuck in my mind. It was I could throw a rock from where I sat in my office in downtown Dallas and probably hit South Dallas. It's not that far away, but it was as if it was someplace exotic and far away and alien, to use an ugly word.